They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play.
Hey guys, we're back with episode number 2 of BDE, so we're excited to be here. We've got a big show. How are you doing, Adam?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Very happy to be back. Today's going to be a fun show. I know we got a lot of great content planned.
And so again, we're very new at this whole new setup for BDE. So if you guys are watching this live, we'd love just to see a comment, jump in there, let us know that it's coming through, that you can see us, that you can hear us, all that good stuff. But reminder, the way the show's formatted currently is the first hour, we're going to be talking about news, current affairs. We've got lots of stories I'm interested in jumping into. In the second half, we do a topical deep dive. Specifically today, Adam's going to be breaking down for us the importance of sleep. And you know, it's something that I'm actually really looking forward to because I didn't necessarily have the best night's sleep last night. So hopefully you've got some great tips for us, Adam.
Yeah, Matt, I've got a full show. I mean, I think we're going to be a couple hours unpacking some of the bad habits both of us are doing on a daily basis and what some of those consequences are. So I'm really excited to jump into that.
Nice. Well, before we jump into the second half of the show, let's cover the first half. So we're going to be talking about Elon Musk and Russia. So he put out a Twitter poll that caused a lot of controversy. It seems very hard to be on the right side of the mob these days when it comes to Ukraine, Russia, unless you're willing to just gamble on complete nuclear war. But do you still see me? I seem to be black on my end.
Oh, I think you are actually frozen and now black, Matt. So I think we've lost Matt's webcam, but the show must go on.
Right.
Perhaps a screen share will solve this.
I'm just going to try and switch cameras here, guys. I'm probably going to turn orange, but we'll just have to roll with it.
Hey, maybe this is a response to Elon. Maybe the orange man is what we needed.
Yeah, okay, so we're just going to run with it. I don't know why this camera defaults to this weird color palette. If I put my hands up, I turn white, but if I down, it's orange, but we're rolling with it. So Elon Musk, Ukraine, and Russia, we're going to be talking about that in today's current affairs section. We're also going to be talking about Kanye West wearing a White Lives Matter shirt and the controversy that came up around that. We'll also dive a little bit deeper into the details behind Black Lives Matter and why some people are calling it a scam, or they're concerned about where at least some of the funds went in regards to BLM. As well, I've got an interesting article from fee.org. I'm a big fan of theirs and a lot of the content they put out. Specifically, we're going to be exploring how to embrace happiness, and it's through the perspective of a 5th century Roman. And then finally, we're going to be talking about some weird election stuff in Canada. There's a handful of different things. We had the Quebec election last night. In addition to that, we've got municipal elections coming up across Ontario. And it turns out, you know, a lot of people just get the job when it comes to municipal elections. I didn't realize how common that was in regards to all this. But anyways, before we jump into the actual news articles, let's just touch upon our quick WTF story of the day. And this one's a doozy in my opinion. So I'm going to pull up my screen share here and let's get into it. High school girls volleyball team banned from own locker room after complaining about trans athlete. So we've heard different stories kind of coming out over the last couple of years around this subject matter, particularly when it comes to individuals that are originally biologically male, identifying as trans and then deciding to participate in school sports on the female teams. So what I just want to highlight from this story and then get your opinion on, Adam, is rather than taking them seriously, and this is in regards to the female students who complained about having a biological male change in the same changing room as them. So this person still has their male junk, I guess. That's how we'll frame it. Rather than taking them seriously or establishing practical measures, including giving the trans team member a private changing area, school officials banned the girls from their own locker room instead, hinting that bullying and harassment charges could follow. A direct quote from one of the female students: "My mom wants me to do this interview to try and make a change," Allen said. "I feel like, for stating my opinion, that I don't want a biological male changing with me, that I should not have harassment charges or bullying charges. They should all be dropped." And we even had Caitlyn Jenner kind of jumping into the fray here and sharing her opinion. "We cannot have biological boys with penises changing next to our daughters in locker rooms and then have our daughters scolded by the school. This is so backwards. Shame on Vermont." And then just kind of a reminder that this isn't the first time we've seen these sort of controversies about biological males using female bathrooms or changing rooms. One of the things that really put this on my radar was around Loudoun County. And quick reminder or refresher in case you guys have forgot, the narrative was partly what led to a student claiming to be trans entering a girl's bathroom in a school in Loudoun County, Virginia, where he raped a female student. The trans student was reportedly moved to another school after the incident, where he allegedly raped another female student a few months later. The trans student was found guilty of sexual assault by the Virginia Juvenile Court. School boards have proven consistently hostile to parental concerns over trans policies while using intimidation tactics to frighten students who ask for privacy. They have also ignored the vast differences in physical prowess between male and female athletes and allowed biological males to dominate female sports in the name of so-called equity. So this is from a Zero Hedge article. Reminder, if you guys ever want to see any of the sources or screen shares that we have throughout these shows, best way to do it is just join our Substack. You can subscribe for free, get access to all of our show notes. But Adam, what's your take here in regards to this situation where a high school girls volleyball team are being banned from their own locker room?
Yeah, I mean, when I first read your article here, I think the first thing I thought about was actually the incident that happened last year with the Wii Spa. So I'm not sure if you recall the Wii Spa, but it was a huge thing that led to several protests in the United States where similar situation, albeit reading your story makes me cringe a little bit more because it's about children, right? We're not talking about consenting adults here. We're not talking about just adults in general, right? This is children. This is high school children. And I personally think this is completely unacceptable and a definite WTF moment. But going back to the Wii Spa, a woman had complained to the spa that there was a person with a penis in the women's change room. And that turned into actually a series of protests in the city. And this is LA. And it led to a lot of real social conflict in that area. And the Wii Spa ultimately got crushed by the public for allowing this to happen, because initially they took the position that there essentially wasn't a transgender class and that was the same thing as having women in the change room. And, regardless of what your position is on that, I don't think it's acceptable to just pass over this as a thing that would be acceptable to subject your children to. I mean, absolutely. I believe the parents of these young ladies should be able to weigh in on the subject matter. And I really don't think you can force somebody's child to be in a room with, what is clearly a biological male. I mean, if you have a penis, there's just no two ways about it, regardless of how you feel socially.
It's hard for me to not feel like we kind of live in the clown timeline or the age of hilarious right now because of some of these stories. To try and unpack things, I understand that individuals that implement some of these policies, they probably have the best of intentions, right? But I think they need to look at the realities in regards to what these policies end up creating, right? And I think that there's a lot to explore in regards to just biological males competing in female sports. When you're thinking particularly at like the high school level, right? When there's potentially scholarships on the line, when there's real consequences to it. But there's also consequences to just forcing females to have to be in the same change room as biological males. At the same time, all that being said, like in grade 9 high school, I didn't like the change room and I was just changing with other dudes. Again, it's just kind of a weird environment to be forced into. But again, in order now to essentially participate on the volleyball team, these girls are having to change one at a time in like a little closet rather than kind of reversing the things and having the one person causing the issue have a private change room. They're forcing all the girls to essentially change in a private change room while the trans students able to have full access to the full change room. It feels like, good intentions gone too far, in my opinion, without looking at the natural consequences that occur.
I would also say the risk reward there just isn't there. I mean, it's simply not there. If there's another private bathroom or other private space, even just the women's bathroom, if that's going to be the thing with a private stall, seems to be more appropriate in this context.
Yeah, absolutely. But anyways, we'll move on from that and let's jump into our daily recommendations. So this is just a little segment where if Adam or I stumbled upon something great, if we've maybe finished reading a book, we just want to share with you guys some recommendations on some content or stories we enjoyed. For myself, I'll go first here. I finally just finished reading The Handmaid's Tale. Have you ever read that, Adam?
No, I haven't, but actually, I believe that's one of Christina's favorite
I'm
stories.
not surprised. I think it's a favorite of a lot of female readers out there, and for whatever reason, it just seems like, I don't know, maybe because it's often positioned as like being very female centric, that I think a lot of guys just never end up picking up the book. The way I ended up deciding to finally read it was I put out a story on Instagram just asking, "Hey, any good stories? I've got some long drives and some downtime coming up. I'd love to get into some good books." And one of my followers recommended it. I really enjoyed the book, and I would put it on par with. I know you're a fan of both these books, 1984 and Brave New World. So I would almost say that like these three books together do an excellent job of just highlighting how we can find ourselves like falling victim to tyranny through a multitude of different trajectories, really, because all three stories are very different, and yet there's similar themes that are touched upon throughout. So again, because I know you enjoyed 1984 and Brave New World, I'd actually highly recommend checking out Handmaiden's Tale. And it, like 1984 and Brave New World, it really kind of leaves me wishing to understand that world or ecosystem and universe more. However, with The Handmaiden's Tale, they do have a better kind of wrap up at the end of the story. So I won't spoil anything, but really encourage you guys, if you've been kind of on the fence about reading The Handmaid's Tale, go check it out.
Yeah, awesome. And the kind of content recommendation I had for you guys was actually a Lex Friedman podcast. It's honestly not one of the most recent, so you're going to have to do a little bit of digging. And I apologize for not having the specific episode number up right now, but we'll post that in the Telegram. But it's Tony Fadell is the guest, and he's actually a Apple product engineer, and he was one of the OGs. He actually was on the team that initially brought us the iPod. So he was on the team that essentially was able to figure out sound compression and compressing audio files so that they didn't lose a ton of fidelity. And I think what struck me as particularly exciting about this episode is just his enthusiasm. I mean, his enthusiasm for the products he was building and his enthusiasm for his product knowledge and expertise in the industry and really pioneering new technology. It was refreshing. And I mean, I just found it to be really exciting to hear from somebody that was so passionate about what they were doing. So regardless of whether or not you're interested in Apple or even that technology itself, I think it's a great listen for anybody.
Nice. Yeah, I know you shared it with me earlier. It's still on my to watch tab, but I plan on getting around to it. All right, guys, we're going to jump into our first story of the day. This is about Elon Musk kind of setting the Twitterverse on fire. Not the first time he's done it. Had you seen this before I kind of put it into the show notes, Adam?
To be honest, no. But once you did, I pulled it up and wow, I was shocked.
Yeah. So this is from Zero Hedge. We'll just kind of quickly go through it and share our opinions here. All hell breaks loose after Musk posts Russia-Ukraine peace Twitter poll. So diving a little bit deeper into the actual poll Elon Musk shared was Ukraine-Russia peace. So there's 4 points here he makes. Redo elections of annexed regions under UN supervision. Russia leaves if that is the will of the people. Crimea, formerly part of Russia, as it has been since 1783. Water supply to Crimea assured, and then Ukraine remains neutral. a essentially just yes or no poll. We saw lots of different blue check marks as well as ambassadors from Ukraine jumping on this and really condemning Elon Musk and calling him out as a Russia sympathizer, a Russia supporter, as a Putin simp. And to me, it's just wild because it feels like less than a couple months ago, all of a sudden everyone back then was clapping and applauding Elon Musk for making Starlink available to Ukraine during the conflict. So he followed by saying the above conditions to ceasefire and peaceful settlement is highly likely to be the outcome in the end anyway, regardless of how much it infuriates people ready to back Ukraine at all costs. As Musk noted, it remains just a question of how many died before then. Ukrainian diplomats, among others, such as Kiev's ambassador to Germany, lashed out, "Fuck off" is my very diplomatic reply to you, said Ambassador Andriy Melnik. And he wasn't the only one that was pretty hot and bothered about Elon Musk's tweet here. I guess my general thought is it really does feel like we're between a rock and a hard place at this moment in time in regards to Ukraine. We've got Zelensky coming out and essentially saying nothing short of regime change in Russia will be acceptable, as well as, reclaiming all Ukrainian territory and pushing all Russia military out of any of those regions. You've got Putin, who recently just had that, by-election or whatever you want to call it in regards to the regions that they're claiming to have annexed, saying that those are now formally part of Russia's territory, and that's not going to be changing. And Elon Musk, I would argue, comes with a very plausible and reasonable compromise here, right? And it's wild to me to see so many people pushing for the freedom of Ukraine, not even willing to entertain this. And it, if Putin's truly committed to this, if Zelensky's truly committed to what he stated as well, it seems like we're going to have a very prolonged, very bloody, very costly war. It's important to understand some of the basics, right? I think Russia's got, is it 3 or 4 times the population of Ukraine? So again, it feels impractical that Ukraine by itself would be able to win this war. And yet it also seems impractical for NATO to be able to join it in a meaningful way beyond what they've already done, simply because it would kind of trigger an escalation of things. And that's where we get into the speculation around nuclear war. So I guess before rambling on with my thoughts, what's your general take here, Adam, in regards to both the Elon Musk kind of proposed solution here, as well as the greater general conflict?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do truly need to do a full episode on this because I don't think it's as clear as it appears on the surface. I think a few observations from this tweet. Musk is taking a pacifist approach, I would say. I would argue that's what he's kind of pushing in this message is like, hey, maybe we should just generally speaking avoid nuclear war and or millions of lives or even tens of thousands of lives lost for something that could arguably just conclude in the same way without the lives lost. And I think you've hit the nail on the head by saying that if everybody is fully committed to this, the idea of escalation seems very clear. And with the Nord Stream issues as well, with like sort of the destruction of that pipeline, I think everybody's now faced with the position where they have to dig in. I mean, they can't pull back. So I think what he's saying makes a lot of sense. And reading through the comments, I think for me was the most perhaps enlightening thing to see what people are saying on this subject matter and the level of naivety. I mean, the people that have just drank the Kool-Aid on this and are essentially pushing for Ukraine to go full in on this, to me is the most shocking part. I mean, I would have thought that we would have learned some lessons from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from even Yemen and shit right now, Vietnam. We can't be pushing these wars. And for the most part, Vietnam's a great example because this is another war where the American people are tricked into thinking this is such a brilliant idea with the Gulf of Tonkin and everything. And hey, let's go invade. Let's go start war. And the same with Japan. I'm freaked out, man. I'm really astonished that people are so hawkish on war without understanding the full and total cost of this happening. And I'm a little bit surprised that kind of the talking head in Zelensky has been allowed to gain as much power or influence as he has. And the fact that now somebody tweeting, hey, maybe we shouldn't go to all out war is a controversial topic. I think that is what's most shocking about this poll.
I definitely want to, build upon that idea of like, how have we not learned this lesson from the past, right? Like, let's look at Iraq and Afghanistan as two very recent ones. You know, 20 years into those conflicts, are those areas better off? Is America better off?
No.
Like, who actually won there outside of military contractors, right? It's very difficult to understand how the world or those individual countries or societies are better off for those conflicts being prolonged to the extent they are. And I really do fear that we're going to end up with some sort of like compromise like Elon Musk is recommending anyways, but we're probably going to end up with it like, is it 5, 10, 20 years from now, once millions of lives have been lost and just untold amount of economic destruction to that region, right? It's very frustrating. And I think Elon Musk did a great job of reframing his original poll after he got that initial
Yep.
backlash. And just want to share this here. So, another Elon Musk tweet. Let's try this then. The will of the people who live in the Donbass and Crimea should decide whether they're part of Russia or Ukraine. Now, to give individuals the sovereignty to make that decision, the inner libertarian or anarchist to me is like, yep, that's a rubber stamp, obvious thing, right? Like, this should be a nothing burger. And yet again, this is somehow extremely controversial. Now, I understand that there's degrees of nuance here. So, what a lot of people will push back on and say, well, a lot of people have fled those regions, right? And so, a lot of people fled into Ukraine and Eastern Europe because they knew this conflict was going on. They didn't want to die, right? And they won't be able to vote. Well, we can make adjustments for those sort of situations, right? Like, there's no reason why we can't find a better solution than just all out, whether it's nuclear holocaust and war or just like a prolonged 20-year engagement. I'm so done with war at this point in time that it's wild to me that that's a controversial take.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. Matt doesn't have a crystal ball, but just ask the Taliban how it's going right now in Afghanistan. And I think that is some indication, at least, of where this can go. I mean, you can wage a 20-year war, have the same outcomes, and you're left with the pieces at the end, anyways. And it's just cost everybody, except, to your point, the military contractors.
Hmm. All right. On the next story, did you see this, Adam, with Kanye West wearing the White Lives Matter shirt and the backlash that you would naturally assume he's going to get about something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I looked into it as soon as you had posted it here as well, and I was interested because of the general theme of what's going on there. I mean, there's children dancing and singing, and he and actually a few other people are wearing the White Lives Matter sweater. So yeah, let's pull it up.
Yeah, and the part that I think really got a lot of blue check marks and leftist pundits going on this wasn't the fact that just Kanye did it, but we also saw Candace Owen, who's a Republican, pundit. She's with the Daily Wire, I believe, has a daily show there, and so both of them were wearing White Lives Matter shirts. And the internet got very upset by this. But this isn't the first time we've seen Kanye West, right, do something a little controversial with political views, right? He was wearing the mega hats, and again, that drove the internet wild. But for those of you watching this, you can obviously see the shirt that he's wearing, which says White Lives Matter. And I don't like one. Kanye West is naturally going to be a polarizing figure. I think that that's just in his nature, right? When he's trying to live in alignment with his authentic self. I don't take any issue with this. One of the things that did mildly jump out to me, though, is that White Lives Matter, that actual phrase, has been like officially framed, I guess, as a hate symbol. So I'm going to jump over to an article from the New York Post that dives a little bit deeper in. They had some great photos here, but it has since been labeled a hate slogan by the Anti Defamation League. And now I get why the term White Lives Matter would sound condescending, why it would frustrate individuals that really believe that there's disparities, particularly in the United States, in regards to how Black people and white people are treated. I totally get that. But I think it's a stretch to immediately say that a term like White Lives Matter is inherently a racist term, right? That it's inherently a bigotous term. And certainly there's something that feels particularly at odds with that perspective when it's being worn by Black individuals, right? What's your thoughts here, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I had similar conflicting thoughts when the All Lives Matter sort of thing was coming out during the kind of protest last year. Or I guess maybe that's 2 years ago now. Time's kind of flying. But I I also don't fully understand the context of what his actual message is with wearing this. So I'm not sure if he's trying to point out the disparity in power or disparity in inequality, or if or if he's just literally saying white lives matter. So I guess from my perspective, it would help to have that context before we pass any judgment on this. And I guess just a real hot take. I also don't think censorship is ever going to work. Censorship, prohibition, these types of things, I don't think they actually really work or have the intended consequence of what the action is supposed to do. And so I think if he wants to wear something like this, I think he should be able to. And this sort of league or defamation thing, classifying this as a racist statement or a racist symbol, I don't think that's really appropriate either. So I would love to get more context from his voice to just kind of see what he means by this. But at the same time, I think it should be, generally speaking, we should be free to say what we want to say.
Sure. And I don't think anyone can perfectly tell what's going on in the mind of Kanye West. I think that that's part of his allure. He's one of my favorite follows on platforms like Instagram. And he actually put out a story on Instagram over the last 24 hours that essentially just stated something to the effect of, Black Lives Matter was a scam. We all know that now. And that in and of itself is a controversial take, but there certainly has been a lot of questions and allegations around the Black Lives Matter movement, and particularly the management or oversight of it. So here's another article from New York Post. And again, you guys can always find these links in our Substack. We'll also probably share them on Telegram. Activists accuse BLM leader of stealing 10 million in a lawsuit. So just high level here, the new leader of the National Black Lives Matter nonprofit siphoned more than 10 million in fees from donors to pay his consulting firm, according to a lawsuit. And further on in the story, BLM Global Network Foundation paid the Bowers consulting firm $2,167,894 in 2021, according to federal tax filings. And then further on, this isn't the only sort of controversy around Black Lives Matter and where the money ended up. The foundation was rocked by controversy after the Post revealed in April 2021 that one of its founders, Patrice Cullors, went on a real estate buying spree, spending more than $3 million on homes in Los Angeles and outside Atlanta. Cullors denied that the money came from donations, and then later on, she resigned from the foundation a month after the Post article. Later, New York Magazine revealed the group secretly spent $6 million on a sprawling mansion in Los Angeles, and to use as its headquarters, and another $8 million on a property in Toronto, Canada. Again, there's a lot to unpack here. I think that almost similar to kind of what we were talking about with Elon Musk in Ukraine, there's a lot of emotions tied up in this, and it's difficult for people to be willing to just look at facts on the ground. And so I think a lot of individuals that chose to support BLM when it initially launched, I do believe that a lot of those individuals had good intentions. And I think a lot of those individuals donated in the hopes that they were going to really see change initiated from a groundswell or, a bottom up sort of mentality. However, and I don't think this is unique to BLM by any stretch of the imagination. I think a lot of these organizations are naturally prone to corruption, right? I think that it's very easy for bad actors to hijack social movements for their own personal gain. Now, again, a lot of these court cases haven't been settled, so I'm not definitively stating one way or the other. But I think when you look at a lot of charities, even here in Canada, right, we can look back to the scandal surrounding Justin Trudeau and the We Charity scandal, where millions of dollars in taxpayer money was paid to We Charity, who happened to also hire Justin Trudeau's mother and wife and paid them very large sums of money. As well, a previous finance minister, his daughter received a large compensation package, and he received free travel from the same We Charity that received literally tens of millions of dollars in taxpayer funds. I think that first things first, most people in these situations just need to take a beat, catch their breath, try and de-escalate the emotions, and try and really look at the facts on the ground. I don't think there's anything wrong with Kanye West or anyone else for that matter wearing a shirt that says in my opinion, literally anything unless it's somehow directly inciting violence in that moment in time. I think that should be acceptable, right? Particularly in any society that, wishes to really hold free speech, right, and individual liberty and freedom in any sort of high regard. But at the same time, I totally understand why this would cause a natural backlash. Part of me wonders if Kanye, just being a marketing genius, doesn't realize that and just wants to get people talking. He's right now in a huge feud between his companies and organizations and previous companies that he'd signed deals with. I think Adidas is one. I'm not really deep on that side of things, but I just kind of catch the highlight reel from his Instagram stories. But I guess anything else on Kanye West and White Lives Matter before we wrap up here, Adam?
No, I'm just looking forward to your Justin Trudeau scandal show, because that's what you just said was so big, and I've already forgotten it, that it's kind of funny. So yeah, let's keep moving here.
All right. So this next story, it's not really so much a story, but it was just an article I want to share with people because, again, I think naturally when talking about a lot of current affairs, it's easy for us to fall down kind of the black pill sentiment, right? Like things are really screwed, things are really effed up, like, there's so much corruption everywhere. And I thought maybe it was worthy of us to check out this fee.org article that kind of maybe lends us some perspective. So, a 5th century Roman's guide to happiness in a world full of pain, loss, and injustice. So, the Roman statesman Boethius was unjustly imprisoned, tortured, and executed. But shortly before his death in 524 AD, he left us a priceless lesson about the gift of life. And part of me, one analogy that you regularly hear these days, at least if you consume the same sort of media that I do, is about comparisons between the US Empire and the Roman Empire. And obviously, by the 5th or 6th century AD, we were starting to really see it wane in its level of power and influence on the global stage. But I wanted to highlight specifically what this book from Boethius really dove into. So while this book is not so widely known today, for centuries it was one of the most popular books in the world, and for good reason. In it, Boethius recounts an imaginary conversation between himself and the personification of philosophy. He begins by lamenting the injustice of his fate, only to be consoled by philosophy pointing out that, despite appearances, he really has nothing to complain about after all. Good fortune, she observes, is fickle by nature. Anyone who chooses to enjoy the gifts of fortune does so in the knowledge that sooner or later they will be taken away. And that actually really hit home for me because I think where a lot of frustration and anger comes from for the average person is when reality doesn't meet expectations. And I think a lot of us, my generation in particular, and future generations as well, we're told that we can literally have, the world is our oyster. We can do anything, anything's possible. And the moment we come into resistance or any sorts of setbacks, it's really easy to want to throw up your hands and, complain about how life's unfair. And certainly there's aspects of life for all of us to varying degrees that is unfair. Another quote here from the article: the most powerful in regards to lessons. So the most powerful is that life is a gift to be cherished. It may be an imperfect gift at times, even a frustrating one, but it is a gift nevertheless. And if we accept it, we should do so with appropriate gratitude and humility. The great illness of our age is myopia that prevents us from gaining the proper perspective over our place in history or in the larger world. And honestly, I felt like this was really important, not just to kind of share with you guys, but even just remind myself of this to a certain degree, because there's times that it can be frustrating, right? We're not live on Rumble right now. Why is that not working? And again, we've also got this marvelous technology where we can actually live stream on multiple platforms to everyone for a nominal cost. I can either be upset that the live stream to Rumble right now, which I eventually want to be our primary platform for video streaming, isn't working, or I can be pleasantly surprised that somehow magically we're able to live stream right now on all the other platforms. Any thoughts on that perspective there in general, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Matt Ridley, and in Matt Ridley's book, The Rational Optimist, he kind of, thoroughly details why we should perhaps be more optimistic. Or what did I just say? The Rational Optimist is the book I'm talking about, and in The Rational Optimist, he breaks down a really thorough study and case. He builds a great argument that we should be much more happy about our situations than we think. I mean, perhaps it is that we're exposed more now to more content that tells us that the world is bad. But in fact, the statistics all show that we're trending up. I mean, we are doing very well in terms of world hunger, in terms of violence, in terms of not even natural disasters is something that we hear about a lot right now, and they're not actually growing in intensity or frequency. Really, we're doing fine, despite us hearing about hurricanes and hearing about earthquakes and hearing about world hunger and things like that. It seems to not be the case, or at least that's the argument he makes in that book. So I do think that we should be more grateful for some of the things that we have. I mean, you can one-click order groceries today to most large cities, at least in North America, from Amazon. You could drive in a motor vehicle that's heated or cooled and whatever to work. Even the fact that we have work, right, is quite an interesting thing, and we have highways and freeways to get to work that are just there for us, right? We have refrigeration, we have all this access to food, technology, and all these things. I think it's something to be actually grateful for. Ask the Romans before the aqueducts how they were doing, right? Is that people are defecating in the streets, literally. So it's I think we should be more grateful. However, and I'm sure you're going to continue down through this reading, but I do think there is a bit of I think a little bit of discomfort or a little bit of anger and frustration is a healthy thing as well. And I think it can be quite motivating.
Yeah, certainly, you don't want to become so easily adaptable to any situation that you'll just accept it at face value and not even try to improve your lot in life or anything to that effect. At the same time, you know, I guess, like, again, just a personal example here. I've got this amazing citadel up in northern Ontario. I absolutely love it. Waterfront property, yada, yada, yada. At the same time, I was hoping that probably within the next year to acquire another one similar to this somewhere in Texas. However, NFTs, crypto, some of my speculative investments, they're down a little. And maybe will take me a little bit longer, or maybe I'll never end up actually acquiring that second citadel in Texas. However, how wild is it to think that you could even have one? How wild is it to even be able to dream, to be able to work towards having a second one? And I think that for a lot of us, gaining that perspective, right, of not necessarily just accepting everything that's given to us in life, but at the same time, understanding that we always have a certain degree of control. And we should really focus on what's under our control or what's under our influence, focus on doing that to the best of our abilities and leaving everything else just up to the fates, right? So again, I can't naturally impact the NFT or the crypto markets, and that's all right. That's okay. I don't need to sweat or stress out about that. But I don't know. It's almost hard to describe, in my opinion, this sort of feeling I have and what this article kind of like highlighted or reminded me of, because I just see so many people disaffected, disillusioned, and frustrated with society at large. And again, part of me totally understands that, right? Like, it's completely absurd that we've got this conflict going on in the Ukraine. It's completely absurd that the Canadian government like locked us down for 2 years. It's completely absurd, in my opinion, that the Justin Trudeau demonized an entire segment of the Canadian population that simply want to be able to travel without restrictions, regardless of their individual medical decisions. But all that being said, I'm really glad that there's not gangs out raping and pillaging and looting my neighborhood or the woods I live around. They're not filled with bandits. So it's always just about like gaining that perspective, right? And I think if you ever find yourself drifting towards nihilism, to the black pill, to really thinking all is lost, I think it's important just to catch your breath, reevaluate things and maybe focus on what's under your individual control and start improving there. And then understanding that regardless of where you're at in life, things probably could be a whole hell of a lot worse.
Yeah, agreed, Matt. And I think even just a quick walk, right? Take a break from social media, take a break from some of these news outlets that are click heavy, right? And a little bit fear pornish, and take a walk, get your face under the sun, and have a moment of silence for you'll see.
All right. Well, switching gears here into the next story. This one, I don't think it's going to get the same sort of fanfare as maybe some of the other stories, and certainly not the same sort of social media coverage as the other stories we've covered up until this point. But it actually kind of blew my mind. So I'm just going to pull it up here, screen share it. And I imagine you didn't know this, Adam. I definitely had no idea. This is from the Toronto Star. It does feel weird 1/5 of Ontario's election races have already been won without a ballot being cast. And even that headline really caught my attention. And there's a few things to unpack here, so I'm just going to get right into it. Less than 3 weeks before the October 24th municipal election, 1/5 of all races in Ontario have already been decided without a ballot being cast. It's a political phenomenon known as acclamation, and new election data shows that it's on the rise. This year, nearly 20% of all elected municipal positions in the province have already been acclaimed, according to an analysis released last week by the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO. That's a 5% increase from 2014. The number of municipal candidates has significantly declined as well. This year, there are about 6,300 candidates running for office, nearly 22% less than in 2010, when over 8,000 people tossed their hat in the ring. The number of seats hasn't changed much. So, before even getting further on into this article, did you realize that, like, on the municipal level, that literally 1 in 5 individuals, essentially no one ran against them, and they were able to just be like, well, seeing how I'm the only dude that put his name in, I guess I'm your mayor. I guess I'm your reeve. I guess I'm your local representative.
I have a suspicion we're not doing enough, Matt. if this is how easy it is to gain these positions of power and influence over what undoubtedly affects hundreds, if not thousands of people, then yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit, I was sticker shocked at this headline for sure.
Yeah, and honestly, to build upon that, and it's one of the things that this article kind of recommends as a potential solution, is first of all, how many people even understand the importance of these local elections? How many people even understand what their municipal level government does or is responsible for? I'll be honest, I think it's very low. Back in my days as a CPA and auditor, I used to audit local municipalities and First Nation reserves and different entities like that. So I feel like I've maybe got a slightly better understanding, but a decent amount of your infrastructure is actually going to be governed or influenced, at least at a minimum, by the local municipality. As well, like simple things like bylaws, right? Any sort of local rules and regulations, those are all being dictated by these individuals. Also, when we look at like school boards, right, it's shocking to me, and I know Ian Smith, who's kind of a political pundit and social media influencer. I forget whether he's out of Winnipeg or if he's American. There's two guys that I always get confused there, but essentially he was talking about the importance of getting involved in local elections, particularly at the school board level. A good friend of mine recently has announced Mark Parvelos out of Guelph that he's going to be running for a local school board seat. And again, one of the reasons he's running for it is he doesn't really like a lot of the equity oriented and identity politics that he sees being pushed on the Guelph school board to his children. And this is the point Ian Smith was really focused on making in his Instagram post, where he's like, you know what? It's awesome to go to personal development seminars, to go to conferences, to lift weights, get in shape, and all that. But if you really want to be a real man, if you want to be like truly living up to your potential, you need to become a leader, and not just like a social media leader or anything like that, but you need to focus on local politics and being able to influence those things. You need to actually be driving the change you want to see. And oftentimes we think if you're not going to be prime minister of Canada, if you're not going to be the president of the United States, you've got no power, you've got no influence, and so why even bother, right? But no, it turns out you probably don't even need, at least in Ontario, a campaign budget in order to potentially be able to win a seat, which again to me is just, it honestly feels embarrassing. I don't know how else to frame it, that literally 1 in 5 seats get acclaimed or acclamation. And one weird thing, just like this is a little pet peeve here about the Toronto Star, it never actually defines this term. So I ended up having to Google it just to make sure that I was interpreting it right. But later on in the article, they do point out that a lot of these positions do go uncontested. And one of their arguments for why maybe people don't want to get involved in these local politics, beyond simply just not understanding the importance of it, is that it really doesn't pay well. So in 2020, counselors in Peterborough, Ontario, earned around $33,000, which is actually more than most in Ontario. According to a 2018 report from the Association of Municipal Managers, Clerks and Treasurers, about 2/3 of municipalities in Ontario paid counselors less than $20,000 annually. And I think that this is really a concern, in my opinion. I don't like the idea of career politicians. I don't think you should get rich by being a politician. However, when you don't pay an adequate sum to encourage individuals to run for these positions, what ends up happening is, in my opinion, only individuals with vested interests, right, are going to run for it. And I can think back, a family member, like a family member of mine owns a large farming operation, and they would always run for in local by-elections because they really cared about agricultural rules and restrictions and things of that nature, because it would impact their beef cattle operation. And totally makes sense, and I get why, but at the same time, understand that because they're such a large operator, they're going to have different biases and incentives versus like the small mom and pop operator when it comes to farming. And that's just like the tip of the iceberg, right? But we need to figure out some sort of better solution here. This is not okay, in my opinion, that 20% almost of these elected officials essentially aren't being elected. I already have major concerns with administrators that are in positions for decades or entire careers that are never actually voted into their positions. But even the positions where we're supposed to be voting in individuals are often not having votes occur. Anything else on this, Adam, you want to touch upon?
Yeah, I mean, there's real consequences, right, to these types of elections occurring. So if you're not out there, you're not representing your interests, they will be represented for you. And Matt, I know, I'm not sure if you're ready for this yet, but if we can pull up the article from the Montreal Gazette on this topic, which was talking about the economy and cost of living under this under the CAQ, which is obviously the political party that has now won and is going to represent Quebec and its constituents. So here's the thing: like if we just scroll down there to the section that talks about economy and cost of living, we are looking at some really wild stuff here. So again, if you're not representing your interests by voting or by getting out there and perhaps leading some of these things yourself, you just have to understand like consequences to this. Like this, we're not playing pretend here. What you guys are saying here is that now the CAQ is going to stay for another 4 years. Here's what you can look forward to. So to combat inflation, the CAQ has promised to give 6.4 million Quebecers checks ranging between $400 and $600 and up to $2,000 per year to seniors. So last time I checked, handing out checks to combat inflation was kind of an oxymoron, and certainly not something that was going to really help the actual citizens. So I don't think that's great. But if we continue down,
Well, and just
yep,
before we even move
got it.
on from that, Adam, I think it's a bigger deal than that. This is, in my opinion, buying votes, right? Because they
Sure.
announced this during their election. So let's look at it at face value, right? Bunch of parties are running. One tells me that if I vote them in, I'll essentially immediately get a $400 to $600 check. All the other parties now either have to play catch up and promise more crazier things, right? This feels like your local what was it, like in school you would have like your school council. This feels like the school council elections where they're like, we're going to build a hockey arena and everyone will get Fridays off and whatever else you guys want to hear, we'll promise it, even though we don't actually have the capabilities or we don't understand the consequences of implementing these policies. And that's what it feels like here with the CAQ.
Yeah, it feels worse. It feels like a divorced couple trying to outcompete on Christmas who's going to get the better gift for their child. To further worsen things here, if we just look under the Quebec identity, right where you are there, the CAQ has also promised that they're going to protect the French language. Okay, and it might not even be on this thing, but essentially, what's going to end up happening here? If you go and you kind of read further into the subject matter, what the CAQ has actually promised is that they are going to put a stop to some of the immigration. Oh, yeah, perhaps it's under this immigration thing. They've had it. They don't want any more immigration for people that don't speak French because they're at risk of, there's a quote of him, you can Google it, of him saying they're at risk of having a suicidal impact on the language of French in Quebec if they allow more immigrants that are non-French speaking to enter the province. And so, of course, they're going to work their hardest to not have that. And so I wonder where this leads and what sort of unintended consequences that Quebec will face by essentially just shutting its doors to non-French speaking immigrants and individuals. And I believe when they were saying immigrants, they also meant people from throughout the country who are entering the province that don't speak French. So interesting to just see again, like the consequences of if you're not actually voting, if you're not getting out there or leading some of these things for yourself, like what's possible to happen to you. Like this has real consequences. I don't think it's great. And then at the bottom there, of course, they're promising a bunch of education. So they're going to invest an additional $2 billion in renovating schools that are aging over the next 4 years, and $1.5 billion to renovate sports facilities. So, you know, on one hand, we've got these guys combating inflation. And then on the other hand, they're giving out checks and sponsoring what only in these claims right here is $3.5 billion of infrastructure. So I'm a little bit confused, to be honest with you. And I'm not really sure how a party like this gets a landslide like they did, but doesn't look ideal for Quebec.
Yeah, and just one last thing on the Quebec election. When you scratch the surface
Oh,
here,
yeah.
this is from Viva Fry. He put out a very insightful tweet, in my opinion. I'm just going to read it off for you guys. Quebec election results. A party with 14.3% of the vote gets 21 of 125 seats. A party with 15.2% of the vote gets 11 seats. A party with 12.92% of the vote gets 0 seats. Works.
Math.
And this is really wild to think, right? That like essentially like these parties all feel like they're at the same level, and yet when you actually look at like the amount of influence that they've got, it's nowhere near that, right? Particularly when we're looking at the PCQ-EED. I don't fully understand Quebec politics, so we won't go deep down it, but again, I just thought that was something worth highlighting here, because it is one of the things that frustrates me about our approach to democracy here in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Quebec with this party is going to get what they've been voting for the last couple of decades. Maybe they'll
Yeah,
break
I
off.
think it's just more the same for Quebec, that's for sure. All right. Well, that's it for today's kind of current affairs and news roundup. We're going to be jumping into our sleeping section, or our deep dive into sleeping that Adam's put together in the second half of the show. I guess before we get into that, any kind of tips that you can tease us with that we're going to be talking about in the second half there, Adam?
Yeah, so we're going to spend a lot of time talking about daily habits and the consequences of those habits on your sleep. And I think one of the most common habits that people have is going to be the use of drugs, including caffeine. And so I think this is kind of obvious, but caffeine is really, really bad for your sleep. And having listened to some of the experts I did my research from, you really need to cut your caffeine out after 2 p.m. You just cannot have it. And if you're going to have it after 4 p.m., I am telling you right now, empirically, you are harming yourself badly. And so that's one of the quick tips I can give you. It sounds obvious, but I need to stress the severity of how bad it is. And in our episode, we're going to jump into that and talk about adenosine and some of the receptors that contribute to those issues and why it matters. So really looking forward to doing a deep dive with you guys. I'm certainly not a sleep expert, but I did do the research for you guys so that I can at least put you on the right path to understanding some of the systems about sleep, how it works, and some of the experts that you may want to consume content from.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it because I know even just based upon the sleepless night I had last night that I'm definitely doing some things wrong. But before we jump into the second segment, I just really want to say I appreciate everyone that's sharing comments, their thoughts, their opinions in the comment section, regardless of where you're watching and streaming this. And just wanted to highlight this one from Kyle Down here in regards to what we're talking about with the municipal elections. I wonder what the average age of the candidates are, whether the older population is getting out of politics than younger people not willing to get into the political atmosphere. And yeah, I right now I don't have that information in front of me. I'm not sure if anyone's tracking it, but part of me, like my spidey senses do tingle and think that the older generation was probably more familiar and more ingrained with their local community, right? I think people were less mobile in the first place. And so if you spent your entire life in one region or one municipality, I feel like you're going to have deeper ties and roots there. And that's probably going to lead you to caring more, right? To being more bought in, or simply even just having a better understanding how that system works. Because I don't remember us being taught that whatsoever in high school, actually how municipal elections work, why they're important, what those municipal officials are capable of, or what their roles and responsibilities are. I suspect that oftentimes it's just falling through the cracks where people understand who the prime minister is. They understand what a member of parliament or even what a member of the provincial parliament is. But once you start going deeper into the local politics, I think for a lot of Canadians, it literally is just like, don't know, don't care.
Yeah, I think I generally speaking agree. And I think that puts us at a pretty significant risk as well as we look at some of the demographics and how things are trending. Like some of these generations just simply aren't going to be here forever. So what are we doing right now to put the right foot forward and have, new younger leaders stepping in? And perhaps this is, Pierre Poilievre, maybe this is contributing to his success, is that there's not as many younger candidates, and those that aren't taking advantage of some of the technology and some of the different things that are available to us these days to promote your message. And I'm interested to see the next generation of politicians and see if it's more of the same or if perhaps we're looking at more of an optimistic future.
Yeah, I really hope that social media leads to greater discourse and not greater like populism and just emotional reactions and like owning the other side. I'd much rather see people get into nuanced conversations around the real political matters that matter to the average Canadian, right? That impact their day-to-day lives. But anyways, we appreciate you guys hanging out with us on the first half of this show. If you guys enjoyed this video, definitely consider smashing that like button or hit the rumble button wherever you're watching this. If you haven't subscribed to the Substack, please do so. That's where we share all our show notes. You're definitely going to want to subscribe for the second half, where Adam's going to be doing the deep dive on sleep, the importance of it, and sharing all of his notes in that regards. I think you wrote like over 2,000 words here, right, Adam?
Yeah, I've got a small essay on sleep coming up here for you guys. And just FYI, by the way, guys, we're doing a topical show every day. Okay. So today is actually health and wellness. Yesterday was business, personal finance, entrepreneurship. So I'm really looking forward to carrying you guys through the week and showing you the different silos and segments that we have prepared for you. Because I think our goal with this show is really to make a well-rounded show that people can consume in order to have the best day ever. And what that means to us is essentially getting 1% better every day. So we're going to start with some of the topics that, matter most to us. And then I think we're also going to be reaching out and expanding our horizons into subject matters that we don't necessarily understand right now ourselves either. And, sleep was one of those things for me. So I'm really looking forward to presenting this for you.
Absolutely. And finally, if you guys haven't joined our Telegram group or channel, please do so. We want to really start having two-way conversations with you guys there. There's probably still some kinks we need to work out on it, but just join, and over time, we'll definitely figure out how Telegram works.
Yeah, I still haven't enabled comments, so that would be one of the kinks that we've got to work out for you guys. But we have posted all the links for today's show from the last 24 in the Telegram chat right now. So if you guys wanted those links and resources, they are in the Telegram group, and the link is below in the description. So with that being said, we'll be back in a couple of minutes, and I'm going to have a chat with you guys about sleep.
They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day, no matter what the weather say. Life is like a record, so just let it play. Educate, motivate, entertain and demonstrate. Health, wealth, relationships, and legacy we elevate. Every day is what you make it, so don't take it and waste it. Never too late to save it. Remember, roses grow from pavement. Let me break this down in layman's. Just wanna live outrageous, build my way to greatness. Gotta speak my truth and face it. Hear the basis lies, gotta challenge it and break it. Take a shot of truth, chase it with some motivation. The best day ever, the best day ever. We gon' squad up, have the best day together. Best day ever, best day ever. night? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play. Best Day Ever Media. Song by Dan the Lost Boy.
Alrighty, welcome back, everybody. This is the second half of the show where we are going to be doing our very first ever health and wellness episode. So every Tuesday, we're going to be talking about health and wellness, and we're going to be exploring topics that we're not necessarily experts in. I'm actually a little bit nervous. I'm not going to lie. This is the first time I've been nervous doing a talk in a very long time because more often than not, we're talking about subject matters that we're quite familiar with. And you know, Matt and I have made lots of YouTube videos. We've done lots of podcasts. We've delivered many talks to our various teams, employees, mentees, events. But we're often talking about real estate. We're talking about things that, we do every day. And this was certainly much more of an exploration and research for me. So once again, I'm a little bit nervous, and we are going to be talking about a subject matter that gets a little bit more technical. And so I certainly had to stretch my mind a little bit to unpack this, but I wanted to cover this subject matter because I think it's important. Malcolm Gladwell posited that it takes 10,000 hours to gain mastery of a subject or skill. And while there is some controversy to that statement, and certainly people have questioned that, I don't know if there's anything that I've actually spent 10,000 hours doing except sleep. So I think that that's why this subject matter is really important. You're going to sleep a lot of hours in your day and a lot of hours throughout your life. You're going to sleep about 229,000 hours if you live to the average age that we're expecting right now. So that's a lot of sleeping. But I think there's actually a huge difference between quantity, quality, and you can impact your sleep throughout a lot of the habits that you do on a daily basis. So Matt, why don't we get started by checking in with your sleep today? I know you mentioned on the first half of the show, you didn't have the best sleep.
Yeah. And so who knows? It could be for a multitude of reasons. I don't consume a lot of caffeine, but I did have 2 black teas yesterday, though I would have cut them off by, it would have been like 1-ish, I guess, my time. So technically I'm under that radar of what you had said. But going into October, I decided I would do a modified sober October and weekdays, not smoke weed. And I've been like an everyday smoker for a long time, particularly in the nights, just like fall asleep like that. Whereas last night that did not happen. And I just like all of a sudden I remembered what like my sober thoughts were like. And it just like, it's hard to turn off my brain, to be honest, at night.
Yeah, and that's actually something a lot of sleep doctors, sleep researchers say that people in your position often say, right? Is that, hey, I use alcohol in the evening, or perhaps stuff like marijuana, cannabis, CBD, in order to actually more quickly or more easily get to sleep. But we're going to actually talk a little bit later in the show about, while that may be true that you're slipping into unconsciousness faster or easier, it's not actually contributing to a better sleep or a higher quality of sleep. And there's a few reasons for that we'll unpack later in the show. But I did have a couple other questions for you, just to get a little bit of a benchmark, a little bit of discussion going here on what some of our daily habits are like at the top. And I'm sure, you watching at home right now, you're going to understand we're not perfect. We're also trying to get 1% better. And that's actually the purpose of this show, is so that we can get 1% better every single day with you guys in an attempt to have the best day ever and bring you guys along with us. So what's your exercise schedule like?
Very inconsistent.
Okay. So I would argue that I have a relatively consistent exercise schedule, and a lot of that has to do with just having the dog now. The dog needs to go on runs a couple times a day, or she will absolutely destroy everything I own. So that does force me outside and walking quite a bit, which actually has a few different benefits when we're talking about sleep. So I would say I probably get a little bit more daily activity than yourself. Caffeine, drugs, alcohol. You said you were a daily smoker. Is there anything else that you would use on like a daily basis? Like, I don't think you drink
No.
much alcohol.
No. So like yeah, that definitely is an impact in my sleep, though. Like when I do to excess, like absolutely it impacts sleep. And same with like caffeine. Don't do a ton of it, but one thing that used to get me all the time back in the day when we were networking IRL is those like 7 p.m. networking events where they've got like tea outs and stuff like that, and I would drink tea. And honestly, that's probably when I first actually like truly understood the feedback loop, because like those nights there was just no sleeping, right? Yeah. And then obviously like every now and then I like to dabble with Adderall, and that will completely nuke my sleeping pattern.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually didn't look into Adderall, but I could assume just from some of my research what Adderall may be doing and why it would affect your quality of sleep. But I mean, I'm sure it's not promoting a great sleep. For myself, I would say I regularly enjoy probably 2 glasses of wine, maybe 2 glasses of wine per night. And that's kind of my regular schedule. I don't consume any marijuana, and I very seldom do any other type of drug, like perhaps psilocybin, extremely rarely. But when I do, obviously you're not sleeping on that either. Screen time, Matt, how much time do you think you're spending every day on the screen?
How many hours are in a day?
Yeah. Okay. Same. So, obviously, screen time's a thing, and we're going to talk about that as well. How about your bedtime and rise time? What time do you go to sleep at night?
I'm not too bad with that. I'll essentially like kind of, and it's kind of weird because like I feel like I'm out of sync with time zones, because like everyone I deal with and interact with is EST and I'm an hour behind. But I'll start like winding down like 9, 10 o'clock my time, and that usually looks like me spending kind of like a hour on the couch with either a book or like my cell phone.
Okay. Yeah, and I would say I fairly consistently jump into bed around that 11 p.m. time. So I'm going to attempt to do that every night. And then I probably rise around 7. And at this point, it's a natural
Oh,
rise
yeah.
for me.
And 7 o'clock is like my time too. I technically set my alarm later, but I'm usually always up by 7.
Yeah, that's not a bad call either, to have that safety net. There are actually some issues with oversleeping, so we can touch on that as well. Have you got any idea of the chemicals that are actually contributing
No,
to our wakefulness or our sleep? No?
no, absolutely not.
Okay. We're going to touch on that in this show as well, because some of those chemicals and some of the things that we've just talked about with our daily habits actually matter, and they are linked together. And I think it's worthwhile to explore some of those subject matters, because I believe it's going to help us to have the tools to better have quality sleep. So I think it's actually important. And then I guess a final question, honestly, how do you typically feel in the morning?
Again, because I'm naturally waking up actually good. So like I would
Okay.
say I feel good because again, like if the alarm clock's involved, right? Or if I've really like nuked my sleeping schedule, then obviously terrible. But on the average day to day, I actually feel solid in the morning, I would say. But part of me, like, I personally think that a lot of that's just like a personal decision. Like if I decide that like I'm gonna have a shitty morning, I absolutely have a shitty morning. And if I decide that no, like I just gotta get up because it's a thing, then it's pretty easy.
Yeah, it's perhaps even harder too, being that you or I don't necessarily need to get up at any specific time, right? As long as we're
Hmm.
making our earliest meetings, which typically aren't very early in the morning, there's not a huge driver. There's not a huge motivator. You don't need to be at the office at 8 a.m. or something like that. Would you say that your energy follows you throughout the day and into the afternoon, or do you find a slump during the afternoon?
Well, that's a good question. I don't really think too much about it. I don't think that I have too much of a slump, and part of me thinks that's because like intermittent fasting, where like I haven't eaten, so like if I eat early, then absolutely I feel like a huge slump.
Yeah, fascinating. What one other thing that you kind of touched on, but I think it's worth just, clearly defining this is that it sounds like you actually do feel a little bit of resistance in the evening when you're trying to go to sleep. Like you're getting lost in your thoughts.
Sure, but like that's literally like I'm lying in bed. I like to. This is something I picked up from a buddy years ago when we used to be like hungover in the morning, and he needed absolute darkness in order to sleep. He would like tie a T-shirt around his head, and so I literally do that. And like I'll just like last night, I was probably up for 2 or 3 hours unnecessarily just trying to fall asleep, and like it part of the time like I'll drift into like um oh, what do you call it? But like where I'm slightly conscious, slightly unconscious, like what's it something dreaming, right? Lucid dreaming. So like I'll be
Yep.
like quasi lucid dreaming, but I find that to be very low quality sleep when I'm doing it.
I actually frequently have lucid dreams where I'm able to control either the subject or the actual content of the dream, which is quite fascinating. And to be fair, for anybody watching, I did not dive into lucid dreaming. There's only so much a guy can do in terms of research for one program. But I do find lucid dreaming to be quite exciting. And then the final question I kind of have for you, and this is a little bit rhetorical, so I'm sorry for being dirty like that, but if you could wake up feeling better on a consistent daily basis, would you want to?
My honest answer, like straight up honest answer would be if it wasn't a lot of work. Like I
Okay.
don't know if I would honestly like if you're like you have to do like these 20 things in order to optimize your sleep and stuff. I know me, I'd probably just kind of shrug or I'd have good intentions and then fall off.
I'm going to give you a few simple tips. I think that would allow you to have not unmeaningful difference in your sleep. I mean, a serious, like meaningful difference in your sleep that would require almost no effort and probably fit your schedule very well. But I find there's a couple things that I just didn't know. And I think that is perhaps one of the more exciting parts of this is that a lot of the things that these sleep experts discuss are not, they're really not unique, hard, novel things to do. It's more so a matter of knowing that it's out there and then tailoring and building and stacking some of your daily habits in order to fit a better version of living to have the best sleep. And we're going to talk about why that matters because there's honestly some really horrific outcomes if you don't sleep enough or if you don't have a high enough quality of sleep. So I just saw here in the comments, Matt, too, a lot of people are contributing to the fact that you wear a shirt. Okay. So there's people saying like, yeah, okay, we've got the eye mask in order to fall asleep. And Matt and I have actually done a fair bit of traveling together and we typically get a hotel room together. So I've actually stolen, Matt, your t-shirt trick from your friend. So it's third generation now. I often sleep with the t-shirt as well because one of the things that happens, and I live in a relatively new subdivision. These new subdivisions have these street lights that are unbelievably bright. They are LEDs that if you have seen Harry Potter, which I know Matt hasn't, but for all the other people out there, that scene where Dumbledore like puts all the light on the street or Hagrid does it. And it's just like unbelievably bright. That is what's going on in my neighborhood. And there's no possible curtain on the market that would allow you to get a true blackout experience. And so I often sleep with a t-shirt as well. So I don't think that's abnormal. But I'm going to bring up for you guys now my notes, and we're going to dive right into the meat and potatoes of this actual conversation and share with you some of the research that I turned up over the last few days, trying to just get a better understanding of how sleep actually works. What are we doing that is hindering or helping our sleep, and some of the consequences to doing that, as well as how to optimize for better sleep on a daily basis so that you feel better. I'm going to start sharing my screen here now. And what this actually is right here is a look at our Substack. So if you guys subscribe to our Substack, you're going to actually have instant access to all of our show notes. We have a lot of show notes here. And like Matt already mentioned, I've got about 2,000 words here. And we're going to be jumping through all of this during this discussion. But I know some of you, if you're like me, you're potentially more of a more visual learner. And so it might help you a little bit more to be reading through these notes rather than listening to them auditorily. And again, if you're listening to this right now on the road on one of our podcasts, you can go over to these Substack notes and watch the videos, click over and actually see the links that we're exploring here and listen to some of the experts that we're bringing up. So this is our Substack. And because I'm playing specific minutes here, specific times of these videos, feel free to watch the entire lengths of these. They're incredible. But for the purpose of the show, we're going to actually just listen to a smaller portion. And even before I get started, I realized that I've incorrectly shared this. And this is, again, part of the learning process because I know that audio was not about to share. So there we go. We've got audio. We're doing it before we make the mistake. First thing I want to bring up here is a video of Matthew Walker, who's a professor at, where the hell is he? He's somewhere in California. Anyways, he's a professor in California, and he's honestly one of the foremost experts, I would say, on sleep and the topic of how to get better sleep. He actually wrote a book called Why We Sleep, Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams. And it is brilliant. I've heard excerpts of it. I've listened to a bunch of podcasts with him at this point, and we're going to be hearing a fair bit from him on this presentation. But for now, we're going to listen to him on Tom Bilyeu's show, Impact Theory, which is another fantastic show for you to learn about various subject matters. So here we go. Let's jump right into the video, and we're going to play till 2:25.
Out of acknowledgement of how much you talk about sleep and the neurological impact. And so I want to start with two things from the book that really blew my mind. And the first is that sleep is so important that the Guinness Book of World Records will not let people try to set records for sleep deprivation. Walk us through why not. I think this is a great entry to your world.
Yes. So what we know is that a lack of sleep will impact just about every major physiological system in your body and almost every operation of your mind. For example, if I were to take you and limit you to just 4 hours of sleep for one single night, there is almost a 70% drop in what we call natural killer cell activity, which are critical anti-cancer fighting immune cells. That's after one night of 4 hours of sleep.
That's crazy.
Secondly, if I were to short sleep you for just 1 week, your levels of testosterone would be that of someone 10 years your senior.
Define short sleep. How many hours are we talking?
So here we could be talking about 4 to 5 hours a night for 4 or 5 nights in a row, which if you look at the data on the survey, that's not unusual for perhaps even 20 to 30% of the population, certainly during the week. We also know from daylight savings time that it doesn't take very much, because there is a global experiment that's performed on about 1.6 billion people across 70 countries twice a year, and it's called daylight savings time. Now, in the spring, when we lose 1 hour of sleep, we see a 24% increase in heart attacks the following day. Yet in the autumn, in the fall, we see a 21% decrease in heart attacks. Now, you collide all of that in.
Okay, so what we just saw there, Matt, do you have any hot takes on some of the stats that he just spit out?
Well, now I just have a better reason to hate daylight savings time. So, like, yeah, I'm all about let's cancel that shit immediately. That's wild, though, to think that like a 20% swing both ways for that time change. And I guess like
1 hour of sleep.
Yeah, part of me wonders though, like, if when you catch up on sleep, does that reset? Like when he's talking about, you know, that 4 hours of sleep and the increase in the cancer thing. Are you so you're literally every single time you're like destroying yourself that you short sleep?
We're going to talk about that in some of the differences in the sleep cycles that we have, and they stack. So I'm going to explore that with us in the next paragraph, essentially. But the short answer is like, not really. So yes, your body does actually a really good job of getting rid of some of those chemicals that are cancer promoting. And it does a really good job of, regenerating cells and healing your body. But when we short ourselves on that sleep, it's very detrimental, and it's very quick to have long lasting results. So, what he just said there is 1 night of 4 hours sleep is going to have a 70% reduction in cancer fighting ability in your body. That's 1 night with 4 hours sleep. If you do this all the time, you are seriously putting yourself in a massive jeopardized state. And then, the other stat that I thought was really interesting in that video is just the 25% increase in heart attacks with just a 1 hour time change. And that's people missing out on 1 hour or having 20% less heart attacks when they gain that hour back of sleep. So, yes, I'm all for canceling daylight savings times. I've never really understood why we do it to begin with. I don't really care when the sun's up. I just want to be sleeping in accordance to, the circadian rhythm, which is, again, something we need to really unpack here. But yeah, I thought that video was a decent illustration of, why it's even worth having this conversation, right? Like, why is sleep really important to having the best day ever? Well, yeah, it actually is. There's a lot of reasons why we need to talk about that. So I thought one of the best places to start when it comes to unpacking sleep is just to really understand what's actually going on when we're sleeping. What's happening in our brain, right? How is it that we sleep? And Matthew Walker, if you digest a lot of his content, he makes a really exciting point about sleep itself and why it's such a ridiculous thing to do. If we think back, hundreds of thousands of years that we've been on the planet and look at any other animal species, millions of years, almost all animals sleep. Okay. But sleep is one of these really weird things where on the surface, it's really hard to understand why it would be advantageous. And it's really, really, really difficult to understand why we would evolve to do it in the first place. When we're sleeping, we're pathetically vulnerable. Okay. You're not moving away from predators. You're completely vulnerable from almost every angle. We're pretty bad at smelling when we're sleeping. We're honestly a lot of us are not very alert to sound when we're sleeping. And like literally anything can kill you when you're in your sleep. You're defenseless. So it doesn't seem obvious why we would do it. But there's a lot of things going on during our sleep that are actually really essential to our bodies staying healthy and being able to recover. So the easiest place to start in this huge topic, I thought, was to kind of look at what sleep phases there are. So to get an idea of what sleep phases there are, I think it helps to just kind of look at this graphic and get an understanding of just kind of what's going on. So my research really turned up that there's essentially two phases. Okay, there's basically just non-REM sleep and REM sleep. Okay. And everybody kind of understands that REM sleep is where we're dreaming. And I think that that's a fairly popular word. Everybody will have heard that before. But I don't really think that everybody has heard of these different states of non-REM sleep, which would be N1, N2, and N3 and 4, which are sometimes combined. It depends what study you're reading. I read a lot of research to get this done. All my research and citations are at the bottom of this Substack article that we've sent out. But the best place to start here is kind of that awake, that light sleep. So we spend about 2 to 5% of our time in this light sleep stage, which is that's kind of the awake. So some people break this into different categories, but we sort of, when we lay down, our brain waves start slowing down and we start actually going into a different state of being, really. And this sort of awakes a period where our body's coming to terms that it needs to slow its heart rate down. It needs to begin cooling down for us to sleep and entering this different stage of brain wave pattern. So anyways, N1 is kind of the awake light sleep. N2 is a deeper sleep, and N3 is sort of the deepest sleep. And you'll see that we spend actually a fair amount of time in the kind of N1, N2 kind of period, which is 45 to 55% of our sleep. 13 to 23% in deep sleep. And we spend only about a quarter of our time sleeping in rapid eye movement, which is the REM sleep. So I thought this infographic here was a really good place to start. I'm just going to maximize my screen a little bit so you guys can see this better. And I think to really understand what's happening here, we need to just sort of define what's going on in the various stages. And then we can talk about later a little bit more about why they're so important and what can happen if you skip some of these things. So N1, falling asleep. This is where your heartbeat, breathing slow down. Okay, your muscles begin to relax and sometimes people, this is where, like, when you're laying down in bed, you start getting that twitch, where it kind of feels like you're falling, or, you almost feel like moving. And that's something that's also very unique as we get into a deeper sleep with N3, that our brainstem does for us, where it essentially paralyzes our body from our dreaming actions, which is really quite unique, that happens. So stage 2, yep.
Quick thing, just on the Twitch thing. Oh,
yeah,
there's a weird echo, but on the Twitch thing, is that normal? Is that like a okay thing? Because I almost have that every single night.
Yeah, the Twitch thing's totally normal, man. Although I don't think every night would be the case for everybody, but it certainly is a normal phenomenon. This is your body essentially slipping down into a deeper state of sleep. And when this is happening, your brain waves, which we're going to talk about next, are actually changing wavelengths. It's really crazy. I'm going to show you guys an infographic on that. It's kind of, to me, I was blown away at like how dynamic our brain actually is. And I think it's quite unique. So as we're going from that falling asleep stage into light sleep, our heartbeat further slows. And one of the reasons that needs to occur is our bodies actually need to drop about 1 to 3 degrees for us to fall asleep. And so in order to do that, we need a slower heartbeat, we need a lower blood pressure, we need to be very relaxed. And when you think about 1 to 3 degrees, like, it doesn't sound like a lot, but as a core temperature, that's actually a very big difference in your body's temperature. So temperature is one of the main contributing factors to whether or not you're going to, first of all, fall asleep, and second of all, stay asleep and have a high quality sleep. So big important part of this. The next thing here is your brain produces sleep spindles, which we're going to unpack in a moment. But this is also a very important part of the process to falling asleep, and some of the things that we were talking about before with our daily habits. And this stage lasts, 25 minutes. It's relatively long in the cycle because we sleep in 90-minute cycles. And you actually go through essentially all of these stages every 90 minutes. And when we're children, we essentially have a lot of REM sleep. And then as we get older, you have a lot more diminishing returns on REM sleep. So you get a lot less REM sleep the older you get. And there's issues with some things around that. And we'll unpack that too. So stage 3, the slow wave sleep. This is actually arguably one of the most important states of sleep next to REM sleep. So slow wave sleep is essentially when your heartbeat and breathing are at its slowest rate. There's no eye movement. Your body is fully relaxed. And in fact, a lot of your autonomic systems are running. Okay. So, we're breathing. Our heart rate is obviously working. Our blood pressure is still being regulated by the body, but we're not able to act out a lot of the things that, like, the sympathetic system wants to do, like moving your actual limbs, right? In this state, we're probably still. Okay. So you're on your side, you're on your back, you're on your stomach. And we're certainly not doing things like, acting out the cliff dive that you just did in your dream. And that's very important because humans have slept in all sorts of places, including, I'm sure, on cliffs, beside cliffs, in trees, at the mouths of caves that are perhaps in dangerous positions. It's really important that we evolve to not move in accordance to what our brain is living out in its dreams. And so this state is very important in order to transition into REM sleep, because it's at this point we become paralyzed to that movement. This is also the stage in which, and this infographic, I would argue, is honestly a little bit elementary in terms of what is actually happening in N3. N3 is probably not as important for some of the reasons this infographic says, but it is true that on an elementary surface level, this is where most of your tissue repair, cell regeneration, and growth occurs. Okay. So if you have, damaged muscles, right? Perhaps you've sprained something, you've been running, you've been doing resistance training, so you're building additional muscle. This is where it's going to happen. Okay. So think of anything physical. Typically, the physical stuff is happening in N3, which is deep sleep, which again is almost at the end of the cycle. And we're not spending a lot of time actually in that state. So it's really important that we get to that state as soon as we can and that we get the maximum benefits from it, because that is where your cell regeneration is and where some of the hormones are being released. This is also where your immune system is going to get a huge boost. So a lot of people would be very familiar with the idea that when you're sick, you feel like sleeping all the time, right? You're kind of, you would prefer to be in bed than out and about doing things. And there's a huge reason for that. And that is just evolutionary process. We have evolved to understand through our brain and the various chemicals that this sleep, this slow wave sleep, is where we can actually rehabilitate ourselves. And it's honestly like we have an entire hospital going on in our bodies working for us to keep all of our cells doing what they should be doing and repair all those things that are hurt by things like viruses and any type of like infections and things that we run into on a daily basis. So N3, the easiest way to think about it, and again, it's kind of elementary to say this, but the best way to think about N3 is, and your deep sleep, is repairing the physical body. Now, N3 transitions us into REM sleep. Okay, so REM sleep, I would say, is as or more important as the deep sleep stage. And the reason for this is we begin dreaming. Okay, so dreaming is a really weird thing. It's not super well understood as I researched it, but there are a lot of things that can be said about this state of our brain. So obviously we have the rapid eye movements. That's what it's called, is REM sleep. Our breathing and heart rates increase dramatically. So they kind of cycle from like these really hard, heavy blips of like high heart rates and high blood pressure, and then they drop almost randomly to low blood pressure, low heart rate, and it's pretty sporadic actually. So your limbs and muscles at this point are fully paralyzed. Your brainstem has done all that work for you and made sure that you can't fly off cliffs or anything like that. And your brain activity is actually nearly indistinguishable from your waking state. Now, one thing that Matthew Walker brought up that I thought was really fascinating about this state is that he actually, hello, Adam. He actually discusses at this stage that your brain does something that has not been ever seen in any other circumstance other than when you're dreaming. And the circumstance he's talking about is your entire cortex lights up. So if you're measuring brain activity with an electro measurement thing, an EEG, your entire cortex lights up at once, all at the same time, and it looks like a Christmas tree, and then it completely turns back off. So your brain almost looks like it's breathing when you're sleeping and dreaming. So it lights up everything all at once, which is something that never happens. It doesn't happen when you're awake. It doesn't happen in animals doing anything else. It only happens when you're dreaming. Your entire brain lights up at once and then shuts back off and then lights back up as if it was breathing. And man, that's freaky and super cool. So it is literally one of the only times where all of our neurons are working together to simultaneously communicate. And that happens in no other circumstance in nature. So I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah, it's just wild. Here is an image that I thought was very interesting to look at. So I think, sorry, I'm kind of blocking the bottom thing on our screen, but I'm going to go through this. So gamma waves. So gamma waves are essentially the wavelengths and the frequency that our brain emits when we're problem solving or concentrating. So right now, I'm concentrating fairly hard on not screwing up this talk. I'm probably using a lot of gamma rays or emitting a lot of gamma rays. I think rays are probably the wrong word. It's waves. See, there I go. Problem solving, concentrating. I will also have a blend of beta waves going on right now as well. because my mind's very active, I'm thinking about the stream. I'm thinking about the fact that Rumble's not streaming right now. I'm thinking about, what does Matt think about this talk? I'm thinking about, what do you at home or in your car right now think about this talk? So my brain is going to have multiple waves going all at the same time. And the reason why that's even important to bring up is because deep sleep, N3, is a state in which all of that shuts off. Okay. Our brain slows down. It goes through this transition. And I think a beautiful analogy to getting to sleep, having quality sleep, and then staying in sleep is not like a switch where we lay down and our lights shut off, but more like landing a plane where there's all these processes and we need to slow down. And eventually we come to this very slow movement on the runway, which is the delta brainwaves. And those brainwaves are essentially us just, it's really cool. It's like our brain and body shut down and just really slow down to a factor of about 1/10 of the brain waves and activity, so that we can actually heal our bodies. And what this is doing is taking a lot of resources from the rest of our body. So imagine there's a finite amount of resources available to your body at any given point. Well, when your body needs to repair itself, it's going to take away a bunch of resources in order to do that. And so this is that state, which I found really cool. I don't know. I thought this was an epic illustration of the different type of brainwave. So right now I'm in that kind of gamma beta stage. And when I'm sleeping, I'm going to slow everything down so that my body has the resources to do that. One of the interesting things to reflect on, and I'm just going to switch back to just a view of Matt and I and continue the talk here. If you guys want to follow along with these show notes, just remember they're on Substack, guys. So N3, this is the deepest stage of sleep, like I mentioned, right before you start dreaming. Well, those delta waves, it's really cool what's actually happening when those delta waves are happening, because what it's actually doing, it's really crazy. Our tissue starts to repair and grow, and it allows for cellular regeneration. But what's also happening at the same time is this activation of what's called the glymphatic system. And the glymphatic system is going to it essentially allows the cells to shrink from our brain, and it acts as like a sewage system, which is really cool. So when the glymphatic system is activated, cerebral spinal fluid is allowed to pulse in and out of the brain. And that's very important, because what's coming in and out of the brain is this stuff called beta amyloid. And beta amyloid is this protein that's been associated with things like Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and all sorts of miserable health conditions and diseases that have to do with our memory and cognitive function. And so it's extremely important that we enter this stage of deep sleep and stay there uninterrupted. And some of the consequences to this, we're going to touch on just next, but it's important to understand that, like, we need to stay uninterrupted in these states, and we can even see when we don't. So, like, I'm sure, Matt, you've been awoken out of a deep sleep before, and you just feel like absolute hell. Like, your brain's not on. You feel groggy. You feel slow. You don't feel like your brain's quite working that well. That phenomenon is actually called sleep inertia. And sleep inertia is real. And actually, it happens even if you wake up naturally. So essentially, for the first hour of the day, after you wake up, your body's still kind of in sleep inertia. It's running through these processes and trying to boot up the system so that it can turn off some of these different systems like the glymphatic system in order to get you to a full state of alertness and wakefulness. And it's important to let our bodies cycle through that, because, again, if we don't allow our bodies to get rid of some of this beta amyloid and some of these proteins and waste that's occurring, and it's natural, it's all natural in our bodies, it's very difficult for us to avoid some of the obvious pitfalls that are like age. They're basically like aging. So when you're not sleeping properly, you're essentially aging your body, whether that's in principle or practice. So, that one night where you're sleeping that 4 hours, probably the profile of your body the next day in terms of hormones is going to look like you have just aged 10 years. And that's, got consequences. And most of those consequences are not going to be great. So that takes us into the stage of the talk, which is, is it more important to sleep longer Or is it more important to have a higher quality sleep, right? And so there's a couple different natural questions you could start thinking about when you start thinking about this. Like, one of the natural questions is like, well, if I only could sleep 4 hours, should I sleep the first 4 hours of my sleep and then wake up early? Or should I stay up as late as I can and then sleep the last 4 hours? Right. And I think a lot of us will have been in this situation practically. So think about my university days, right? Thinking about cramming for the test, you're going to stay up late and then get up early, or get up at your normal time, but you just stayed up. Here's the deal. It's really dangerous because our body moving through those cycles, and why it was so important to unpack the phases of sleep. So our body must go through all the stages. Okay. So what ends up happening is your brain is going to cycle you through N1, N2, N3, N4, and REM. And it doesn't care that you missed the 4 hours before. And so what does that actually mean? Well, it means that your body is it's essentially going to, following its own circadian clock, understand that you missed 4 hours at the start. So it's going to try and rush everything in. And then what ends up happening is, so the first half of your sleep, the easiest way to look at this, first half is kind of your deep sleep, which is repairing your physical body. Second half is repairing all of your emotional centers. So that's kind of what REM does. It's sort of the psychologist for yourself. It repairs your emotions. It repairs your mental state for the next day. And what ends up happening here is if you rush through it, your body is not going to spend the time it needs on cellular regeneration, on preparing your muscles, preparing everything else that you need physically for the next day. And what that ends up doing is having a cascading effect on your mental state. And on the same, other side of the same coin, if you wake up before you finish some of your REM cycles, you are more likely going to have agitations. You are more likely to be emotionally unstable. You are more likely to have a lack in critical thinking. There's a lot of reasons why we need to go through these cycles and why we shouldn't sacrifice the full term of sleep, which for the average adult needs to be about 7 to 9 hours. So here's some telltale signs of if you're getting a poor sleep. And I think a lot of you will be aware of some of these signs. And I'm just going to pull up my screen again because it'll be easy for you guys to follow around if you can't keep track of what I'm saying. But some telltale signs that you're actually not getting a quality sleep would be that you take more than 30 minutes to fall asleep after you get into bed. Okay. Or you wake up more than once per night. Okay. It's actually very normal to wake up once per night and go to the bathroom. That's something that naturally occurs. And in fact, as we get older, because we spend less time in REM sleep, we spend more time in the deep sleep phase. And when we're transitioning between those two different things, sometimes we move our bodies, right? Like between REM states and so between going from REM sleep into a lighter sleep, often that's when you're kind of waking up, right? You're going to wake up, roll over, fix your position. Maybe you're on your back, you're going to move to your side. And most of these things aren't logged into our memory, but we do occasionally get up to go to the bathroom or something. That happens a lot. It's perfectly normal if you're getting up to go to the bathroom and then you go back to sleep and you fall asleep right away. But if you're staying awake for more than 20 minutes here and you're in the middle of the night, that's an indication you've got bad daily habits that you can start working on. 85% of your time in bed is sleep. So again, like if you're perhaps in a situation like Matt's where you're laying down and you're staying awake for a long period of time because you're lost in your thoughts or you're daydreaming, whatever that may be, that's an indication that there are some habits you can improve on. If you feel difficulty concentrating during the day, if you're, your skin's breaking out, if you feel hungry more often, and especially for junk food, if you're feeling stressed, emotionally exhausted, angrier than usual, this is definitely an indication that you have habits that are affecting your sleep. I threw in here, if you've been diagnosed with insomnia, that's kind of a gimme. Sorry, guys, I need my word count up. But that is a gimme. But conversely, there are some signals that you're getting a high quality of sleep. Okay. So when you lay down and you're falling asleep within 30 minutes, that is an indication that you've been sleeping properly. If you fall asleep and you sleep through the entire night and you don't wake up to go to the bathroom more than, once or arguably twice, that's an indication you're getting a great level of sleep. Maybe your habits or what you're doing now are working well for you. If you're able to sleep the full 7 to 9 hours, that's a great indication that you're actually getting the right habits in order to keep you sleeping. And again, if you lay back down and you fall asleep right away, that's a great indication that you're actually getting a lot of sleep. Now, I wanted to draw our attention to a glaring and obvious problem that seems to be permeating, the culture at the very least in the first world and in North America. And this particular study is just talking about the United States. So when we're talking about sleep quality and we're talking about the idea that it's so important for all these different reasons, fighting off disease, cellular regeneration, your mental state during the day, including focus, acuity, emotional intelligence, all of these things are related to sleep. But here's one of the problems that we're seeing right now is that 35%, and this is reported by the CDC, 35% of US adults are not getting the recommended sleep each night. Okay. So they're sleeping less than they should be. And just to give you an approximate amount of, how many people is 35% of the US? Well, it's roughly 116 million people in the US alone that are not getting a recommended 7 hours of sleep per night. Well, that's a little bit scary, isn't it? When we consider that this is going to actually have a huge contribution in their mood, their memory, their decision-making, their judgment, their ability to learn new things, their reflexes. Matt, can you think of some reasons why it might be an issue if people's moods, memory, decision-making, judgment, ability to learn new things, and reflexes are impaired on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think there's some pretty obvious consequences there.
Okay, this is your bus driver. This is your pilot. This is the guy driving beside you on the freeway. This is, the guy operating the crane above you as you're walking downtown.
Well, I think for some of us, even, I would imagine the majority of us that have done highway driving, right? Like you've probably followed or been followed by someone, or maybe you've been the driver yourself and you've noticed their lack of reaction time, they're dozing off, all those sort of scary things.
Yeah. And of course, this is compounded as well by some of the technological distractions that we have, like our cell phones. So it all matters. It systemically matters. And, it doesn't stop there. So I want to share with you as well some of the health issues and health risks associated with the lack of sleep. These include heart attacks, cancer, damage to DNA, obesity, stroke, diabetes, depression, immune system damage. And, those things alone, as Matt Walker shared in the first video clip that we played for you guys, this can all occur with just a 4-hour lack of sleep. Of course, if you have a night where you sleep only 4 hours, you're not immediately going to get cancer. But what he's saying is if you systemically have these issues or habitually have this issue where you're not actually getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep on average, you are at much greater risk of having issues like cancers, heart attack, damage to your DNA, obesity, stroke, diabetes, and depression. And that's not good. The other thing is the immune system damage, right? We saw over the last couple of years with things like COVID, how important it was to have a strong immune system. Sleep is a major contributor to whether or not your immune system's working. I wanted to play a clip here from Joe Rogan's podcast. So I'm going to just bring that up for you guys as well. It's Matt Walker on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I'm hoping it's not redundant now, but I'm pulling it up. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Share.
Would not condone that sort of, undergoing sleep just based on the mortality and, risk of Alzheimer's and cancer by itself. You just don't want to undersleep. Even in short doses, like a couple days a week, like here's if sleep is not a renewable resource, like what is the effect of, say, if you have 3 nights a week where you sleep 8 hours and then the next night 2 hours and then the next night 8 hours, how much of a bump or how much of a dip does that 2 hours give you in your overall health? It's bad. It's bad. So I'll give you two examples. There was a study where they just took individuals and they just gave them 4 hours of sleep for one night. And what they saw was a 70% reduction in critical anti-cancer fighting immune cells called natural killer cells. These are wonderful immune assassins that target malignant cells. So today, both you and I have produced cancer cells in our body. What prevents those cancer cells from becoming the disease that we call cancer is in part these natural killer cells. And after one night of 4 hours of sleep, that is a remarkable state of immune deficiency. And that's one of the reasons why insufficient sleep predicts cancer. Wow. I could also speak about your cardiovascular system, though, and all it takes is 1 hour.
Okay. So like he's being very serious, and this is him parading on like every major podcast in the United States of America. And his message is literally the same, that 4 hours of sleep is detrimental. 1 hour of sleep is also detrimental. And that's okay. Okay. Cause there's habits, there's things that we can do to improve that situation. Matt, the questions I asked you at the start of the stream about what were some of our daily habits and kind of the discussion we had, right? It sounds like both of us are, consuming some drugs of some sort. So, you're having some marijuana. I'm having some alcohol. We're both occasionally having caffeine. It sounds like we have regularly routine sleep schedules, which is pretty good. I would say for people that, don't even necessarily have that like job to wake up to go to, I think we're on pace there for having good habits. But there's a few other things that I bet we both haven't considered. So I want to talk now about why your habits matter and what some of the positive habits you can do to improve your sleep are. So one of the first things that is brought up by all the sleep experts that I could find on the internet was this need for adequate lighting in the morning. So Matt, have you heard about this? Like, have you heard about light viewing?
No.
Okay. So legitimately one of the simplest things, and I told you this wasn't going to be hard for you. One of the best things that you could do for yourself is to expose yourself to 5 minutes of direct sunlight in the morning. But there's a caveat. And this is something that I really didn't understand. You need to view it through your eyeballs. Okay. And this sounds strange, but there's all of these systems in your brain that essentially take in light waves and interpret what time of the day it is. And because we've evolved for literally millions of years, our brains understand the difference between morning sun, essentially the position of the sun in the sky, as well as the wavelengths of the color that the sun is producing in the morning and in the evening. So we have this internal clock, and this internal clock essentially is running, and a lot of us just refer to it as a circadian rhythm. And that's essentially just what's the sun doing. So one of the most important things that we could possibly do to improve our habits in the morning is to wake up and immediately put sun in our eyeballs. It's not enough to have it on your skin. And the reason for that is because when it goes through your eyes, so literally you want to be looking at the sun in the morning, you can blink, you can do all those things. No glass, no sunglasses. Okay, so that drive to work in the morning in the car through the windshield, it doesn't count. Okay, it's not as good. The viewing the sun through sunglasses, not as good. You're going to filter out some of these light rays. So our eyeballs are directly communicating to our brains what time it is when we wake up and we view the sun through them. And I thought that was profound, but it literally has a remarkable difference in your quality of wakefulness, in like your ability to think, your ability to problem solve, your level of focus during the day, the duration of how long you're going to be awake and alert is massively increased if you view the sun in the morning. Okay. So first thing you do when you wake up, go get some light in your eyes. The sun, you need it. Now, if you're in a place like, say, Britain or England, where it's just never sunny, you're going to need a lot of this. So even on a cloudy day, our brains understand that the sun is up, and we can look at the sun for about half an hour to actually do that. Seems impractical, but that's what you got to do if you're going to live where it rains every day. For us, though, we can watch the sunrise. 5 minutes is good enough to have an exponential increase in alertness and wakefulness throughout the day. Okay, so that is going to help set the clock. And then in the evening, the same thing happens. In the evening, you should go light viewing with your eyes when the sun's not in the top of the sky, not when it's, in the midday, but in the evening when it's setting. There's a different spectrum of light that comes through your eyeballs when you're viewing a setting sun. That tells your brain, hey, the sun's setting. It's time to start producing things like melatonin. It's time to start producing those hormones that are going to actually put us to sleep. Okay. One thing that we do very poorly is unnatural light. Okay. So, and it's actually all spectrum. So a lot of people will say, oh, I got my blue glasses. I'm good to go. I got my blue blockers. It's actually not as effective as you think. And all unnatural light sources that are bright are tricking your body to essentially delay its reaction to a chemical that builds up in our brain called adenosine. Okay. So adenosine is this really cool thing that we have to talk about when we're talking about some of the drugs that you and I have been doing. So adenosine is essentially the waste product of our brain consuming energy. Okay, so as your brain consumes energy, it puts out, almost like a car puts out carbon dioxide, it puts out adenosine into your brain. So as adenosine is being produced throughout the day as this waste product of your brain actually just working and doing its normal thing, it is going to indicate to your body that you're getting tired. So the reason why you're wakeful in the morning is because your brain has dumped all the adenosine. The reason why you get tired throughout the day is because you've got this buildup, this almost pressure of adenosine building up in your brain. Things that really mess with adenosine, caffeine, alcohol, right? Drugs. So adenosine is good. It's perfectly natural. What we're doing when we look at the light in the morning is we're pushing off that adenosine a little bit further into the evening for when we're supposed to be naturally starting to recognize that buildup of adenosine and getting tired. So when we wake up, we need to get the sun in our eyes. And then caffeine. This is a really big tip that can help everybody that's watching this have more wakefulness and have a more alert day during the day and then get to sleep better. You have to avoid caffeine after 2 p.m. And the reason for that is it's an adenosine antagonist. And so essentially what it does is it replaces the space in the adenosine receptor that would allow the adenosine to be recognized. So it doesn't remove the adenosine. It just essentially tricks your body into thinking it doesn't have as much adenosine right now build up as it actually does. And that's why we experience that caffeine crash. So if you're waking up and drinking caffeine right in the morning, you are essentially delaying an essential process of your body understanding the actual time of day that it is and recognizing its own circadian rhythm. And that is going to lead you to crash. And what ends up happening is this vicious circle. You crash, so you drink more caffeine to pick yourself back up. That then delays the adenosine process further, which promotes a dump in the evening. But it will interfere as well with your sleep state. So drugs, alcohol, caffeine, these things are going to very severely promote they're going to very severely prevent you from getting into the proper stage of sleep for the right amount of duration that you need to be in to actually get the benefits of deep sleep and REM sleep. Okay. So you will fully recognize this, Matt. When you stop smoking weed, you start having vivid dreams, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a response to your body not being able to get that full deep sleep, and then it's rushing through and trying to make up for lost REM sleep. So when you are smoking weed and you don't have that REM sleep, you're actually robbing yourself of mental acuity, emotional stability, emotional intelligence, and all these different things that could be improved had you improved that habit. Eating large meals. Okay. When you eat a large meal, this diverts blood away from your brain and from the other organs and systems that are supposed to be running you through your sleep systems. So it's very important to not eat large meals right before bed. It's going to completely reorganize how your body is consuming its energy and what systems are operating when you should be sleeping. Bad practice. Do not eat large meals right before bed. Exercise. Exercise is an incredible way to tell your body what the circadian clock should be. Morning exercise has proved to be the most effective way to get great sleep in the evening. So I think that's something that is an actionable item that anybody viewing this could start doing, is even switching your body around from eating in the evening where you're consuming a large meal that then forces your body to run through various systems and processes that aren't conducive to great deep sleep. And exercising in the evening also has the same effect. The same thing goes for drugs, alcohol. Okay. If you're smoking weed right before you go to sleep, your brain is not going to properly run through the systems and processes it needs to engage some of these systems, like the glymphatic system. It's just not going to work for you. A couple other things that you really want to be aware of is autonomic timing. So with autonomic timing, this is essentially like your body knows its schedule, and your brain kind of intuits what systems to run and when. And so it's actually really important to wake up at the same time every day. It's just as important to go to bed at the same time every day. It's really beneficial as well to time your exercise, your food, your caffeine intake, and everything else that's in your control to the same time every day. If you do that, your brain will actually recognize the patterns that you're going through, and it just automatically runs these systems for you. So I think, Matt, for our takeaways, because I think we're getting close to the end of the show here, for some of the takeaways and actionable items of how you could just start sleeping better and waking up better and having more energy throughout the day, and arguably extending the longevity of your life through having less disease, less immune issues, and less issues with like heart attack, stroke, and those things that are potentially going to kill you. It's pretty simple. You go to bed at the same time, you wake up at the same time, you limit your caffeine and drugs to before like at least 7-8 hours before you're about to sleep. And then when you first wake up, it's really important to get light in your eyeballs. And it's equally as important to get light in your eyeballs in the evening. So if you can wake up, at the same time every morning. One of the things I actually forgot to mention, this is another hack, but it's maybe not going to be easy for people. So I wouldn't blame you if you didn't do it. Cold temperatures. Okay. Cold shower. It's really interesting. Cold showers have I don't know how to say this. It's not what you think. So a cold shower is not lowering your body temperature, which would actually not be what you want. So in order to wake your body up and get out of your final sleep, your body actually needs to warm up 1 to 3 degrees Celsius. And that is going to bring you up and out of the sleep that you were in. And so in order to maximize your alertness during the day, you actually want to raise your core temperature early. And you can do that basically only 2 ways. One way is exercise. So like get some cardiovascular exercise. The second way, it's a hack, is a cold shower for 1 to 3 minutes. If you go longer than the 1 to 3 minutes, you're at risk of actually dropping your core temperature. But going 1 to 3 minutes with cold shower will actually it will force your body to raise its internal temperature, because your body thinks, oh, it's cold, I should get warmer. And that will increase your alertness throughout the day. So those are some tricks and tips that you can do. Wake up, get sun in your eyes, move your body, potentially do something to increase your core temperature right in the morning, delay your caffeine consumption or any other drug for at least 120 minutes in the morning to allow the adenosine to properly begin its phase, and for all your other systems to shut down throughout that sleep inertia. Then you want to time your meals so that you're not eating large meals in the evening, and you want to get off your phones, get off your bright lights and screens well before you go to sleep. I'm talking at least a couple hours at least. And then in the evening, just try and get in some light viewing through your eyeballs without interference from windows or sunglasses or anything like that. And then go to bed at the same time. That is it. And that literally can have all those benefits of reducing strokes, heart attacks, disease, DNA damage, all the obvious things throughout the day, like mental fatigue, right? Fogginess, not having mental clarity, potentially car accidents. I mean, this has real impacts. So yeah, I mean, guy, that's what I have on sleep. That's what I learned in sleep over a few days. And I hope that was informative for you guys. And Matt, did you have any hot takes or anything that was surprising here?
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed the thoroughness there, Adam. And just, I think, honestly, probably a lot of us have heard bits and pieces of the stuff you kind of said, but oftentimes without it being anchored to like a more formal understanding of the potential consequences of some of those decisions we make. I think it can be really easy to be like, oh, I probably should try and go to bed at the same time, but what are you going to do? Lots of people don't. And I probably should try and wake up at the same time, but what you going to do? A lot of people don't. I should try and cut off caffeine earlier in the day, but my coworkers drink until 4 p.m. So like, why should I not? And yeah, I just really appreciate it. I think that, sleep is obviously a very important factor when it comes to every individual's health, and to explore it further is great.
Yeah, I think one of the things that stuck out to me so glaringly was the cultural kind of rift between these findings and what we do, right? Here's something for you. We're all about to go into Thanksgiving, all right? And I'm sure this is evergreen content, so we're recording this in October, okay? It's about to be Thanksgiving here in Canada. We are all about to embark on a major feast of large meals before we sleep, probably over-consuming alcohol, probably having caffeine or at least alcohol, aperitivos, right? Beverages after dinner. We're all about to go eat a bunch of crazy food, which is something I didn't want to dive into that, but what you eat also matters almost as much as when you eat it. So, we're about to eat gravy and sugar and alcohol. And perhaps because you're drinking, you have an evening cigarette or a cigar. And all of these things are going to cascade into these big issues. And culturally, that is what we do. In fact, it's celebrated, right? I can think of a lot of our business meetings where, it wouldn't be abnormal to have cocktails into after midnight. And so these things are not helping us. And I guess just to kind of top this off, I wanted to share just one little graphic here from Andrew Huberman, who, by the way, if you want to continue your research, if you want to go deeper down the rabbit hole, check Matt Walker out. Check out Huberman Lab podcast. And this podcast is fantastic. He talks about a lot more than just sleep, but this guy's really brilliant. And to kind of, put the bow on this thing, here's a tweet from Andrew Huberman, who is a PhD. The best nootropic, sleep. The best stress relief, sleep. The best trauma release, sleep. The best immune booster, sleep. The best hormone augmentation, sleep. I honestly forgot to bring up the hormones. Growth hormone, testosterone, all those things that you need to be a high functioning person are all produced when you're going to sleep. Okay. And that's sort of something I forgot to mention during REM sleep is REM, which was not traditionally thought of as being so important for your hormones, is incredibly important, as they're finding out today with new research. So you need to get into that dream state. Drugs, alcohol, caffeine are all preventing that. So skip it.
I guess one of our big goals here, Adam, is if you're going to drink day drunk.
So it's funny. They actually mentioned this. Yes, it honestly would be better, but it still has downstream effects because of the half-life of caffeine or alcohol and THC as well. They do have half-lives of like 12 hours. So there's still issues with that, right? So and then finally on this infographic here, the best emotional stabilizer, sleep. So I believe having a high quality sleep, improving some of your habits, getting 1% better every day is one of the ways that we can live our best day ever. And that's going to help us improve our business relationships, our personal and romantic relationships, as well as just our quality of life. I mean, if you can do some of these basic things that I said, and they don't seem hard. And in fact, I've been experimenting with these things the last few days. I feel YouTube's going to demonetize us. I feel fucking incredible. And I think it's worth feeling incredible, right? And sometimes maybe that does require some sacrifice. It's worth it. So I'm really happy if you're watching this, you've stuck through the first of, many episodes where we're going to do deep dives into things that we didn't really know a ton about before we got started. So I'm really excited to be here learning with you guys. And I hope you enjoyed this talk on sleep.
Yeah, really appreciate it, Adam. And reminder, guys, notes and links and everything is in the Substack article. So that's the best place to go if you'd like to do a deeper dive when it comes to sleep.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it for today's show, Matt. And I'm going to play us out. Please go and subscribe, like, share the thing. I'd love to get more people on the path to having the best day ever. And that's ultimately what we're here for.
They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play.